scary.
It's all right. No pressure though.
It's like, all of a
No
sudden, I was
pressure.
going to say this one.
Give it up for Mark Hall.
Yeah. See, if you've seen Bohemian Rhapsody, I just know I get to sing a lot of things. So, good morning. My name is Mark Caldwell, and I know most of you, so I thank you for being here, and those watching, obviously, I appreciate you visiting as well. I feel honored to be here. Honestly, I told Jonathan, this last Wednesday I didn't know I was doing this. He says, hey, I got this idea, because I had a very visceral reaction to last week's presentation by the St. Louis 1Million Cups, and to a couple things that were said, and how it even started. And based on that visceral reaction, Jonathan, Dennis, and I sat down and said, maybe this would be an interesting topic actually to talk about. So let me tell you what that reaction was and why I think I'm here. One of the very first things that was said in the presentation this last week, which I thought overall was very informative, very good, but it started pushing this, not enough people are getting VC money out there. And I started to think to myself, well, wait a minute, I don't know that everybody should be going after VC money. It's like saying, I think somebody made the comment, everyone thinks every kid coming out of high school ought to go to college. I'm not convinced that's true, right? There are certain children that should go to college. Certainly we need tradespeople as well. I mean, the world needs Indians as much as chiefs, and I don't mean it in that directly, but that's true. And I think what we lack so much in our discussions today is really brutal honesty, so that we can all have a real view of what the world looks like. So let me tell you what the comment that got this started is. Afterwards, we had a discussion that I thought was going to last a half an hour or so, and I think the group of us, a lot of us sat here for a better part of 2 hours. And I'm not going to point at anybody, but Joe made a comment when he was sitting back here, and I was sitting exactly in the seat that Joe was sitting in, and I understand exactly what he meant. He says, I think sometimes not enough of us, we celebrate failure. And it hit me viscerally. I said, wow. I said, I think I know exactly what he means. And what I would think about that is we need to make sure entrepreneurs, when we go into this, likely chances are we will fail. We're likely to fail, much more likely to fail than to survive. I'm a guy with vocabulary. If anybody here knows that has ever said, how are you doing? I have one response, right? It's outstanding. I never say fine. People don't care about fine. My standard answer is, I'm always outstanding, but thanks for asking. My children, as they grew up, were not allowed to say fine. They weren't allowed to. I swear to God. I mean, so I was waiting for Michael, my son, who's the state rep. Is he here? Good. And he can tell you, I used to make Michael and my other two sons stand in the mirror as they grew up and raise their hand, and he would say, I, Michael Caldwell, am responsible for the consequences of my actions. I'm not a victim. Every day. Okay? Every day. I'm Michael Caldwell, responsible for the consequences of my actions. I'm not a victim, which means I also own my own success. As it relates to today and our topic of today, what it really means to me is it's especially true as it comes to funding. When you start borrowing money, that's a really big deal. And I think way too many people, way too many entrepreneurs I meet take that way too lightly. So what I didn't do today is to come with a presentation to put up a bunch of PowerPoint slides and walk you through, here are the steps to going and getting money. We can talk about that if you'd like. We'll go into some detail about that. But at the end of the day, I think that if any of you don't know how to use Google by this point, I would say very bluntly, maybe you shouldn't be an entrepreneur. Okay? And before the question comes out, how would I find an angel investor? Maybe I ought not be an entrepreneur. I mean, honestly, I did this for fun last night. I went to Google and I said, angel investors in Atlanta. And it brought me to angel.co, and you could go by industry, and there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these angel investors. So I don't mean to push back any questions, but I also don't believe that all questions are smart questions. Right? So I'm hoping that if you are interested in funding, or just if this is just a basic, I'm going to learn about what funding might look like, this is a great time for us to have that interaction, both on two-way conversation. If it's the basics on what is funding, then I'd love to take you out to lunch. Let's go talk about that. We'll go deeper into that. I did bring a cheat sheet here because I got certain things that I want to make sure I don't hit, so that's the length of my notes here. But my background, again, I want to be really blunt. I also am going to be very careful today that I don't go into too many specifics, and the reason is obvious, is some of the specifics are buried in contracts that aren't public domain knowledge, right? And so I have business partners that obviously I wouldn't want them divulging things about my background or theirs, so I'm going to protect the innocent and the guilty as well. But my background is this. I went to University of Michigan. I was a computer science major, not a very good student, but that's been me, not very good in academics anyways. But at the end of the day, what I knew I wanted to do is I wanted to get into the software industry.
And this is back in the mid-'80s. I mean, I graduated high school in 1982, so most of you, by the time I got to college, probably weren't born. But at the end of the day, I went into the software industry when it was still nascent, very, very early beginnings. I mean, literally where we didn't have screens for the computers. And so I am the guy with the punch cards and the paper coming off a reel, that kind of stuff. I had a typewriter in my college dorm room. A typewriter, that's one of those things with keys that click, 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 So anyways, long story short, I went into the software industry. I became a sales guy very early on, and because I realized, one, I'm really bad at coding, but number two, I realized that money was important to me. And a lot of people, money's not important, and if money's not important to you, don't go try to borrow money from people. Okay, because I'll tell you what, if they don't think money's important to you, or you make that comment, they have no interest in investing in you, because quite frankly, they're not necessarily investing in you, they're investing in a way to get better returns on their money. I hope that makes sense. I mean, some of the things I'm going to say, hopefully you don't walk away and go, oh my God, that guy. What I am telling you is kind of some of the brutal truth, and to everything I say, there are always exceptions. So when you ask me some questions, I'll say, well, it depends. It's almost never a yes or no question. So as we get into this, that's I think what you're going to feel. I got into the software industry, got into sales, software sales. Very lucrative. My wife and I didn't know anything about money, found ourselves in a ton of debt. Good thing software sales is good because I had a big shovel to dig myself out, and so we went out and paid off all that money. We learned, don't do that, don't do that. I learned to be in deep debt. I mean, I'm talking about in the 80s in $75,000 in credit card debt kind of debt. As my wife and I moved 8 times in 9 years, my son, who was born in Ann Arbor, we went from Ann Arbor out to San Jose, because I thought it was supposed to be in Silicon Valley, back to Ann Arbor, down to Dallas, back to Ann Arbor, down to Atlanta, up to Charlotte, back to Atlanta in 8 years. Okay? So we finally, the last time, planted our anchor and said, we're staying here, because I thought there's a great community here in the software industry, lots of jobs. Never thought about entrepreneurship at that time. I was jumping around trying to find a job that I thought was a better job. So it's the kind of thing when you go and interview. I used to have fun with interviews. That was the ultimate in selling yourself, right? That's the ultimate sale. Go sell yourself. So you go into an interview, you get that offer. Well, if it's a better offer, you go take it. I never once thought, and this is me pointing at me, bad guy. Never once thought, maybe I ought to be interviewing them as much as they're interviewing me to figure out, is this what I want to do with my life? Is this the right path for where I want to go? Because quite frankly, I didn't know where I wanted to go. Right now, today, sitting here today at 54 years old, I have no idea what I want to do when I grow up. Okay, my LinkedIn says semi-retired because I'm sure I'm going to go do something. I have no idea what it is. No clue. Coming up in 2 years. I got to figure it out pretty soon. My wife says, literally, she says, Mark, you got to get out of the house. I'm like, yeah, I know. She says, no, seriously, get out of the house. So that's it. So I'm out of the house today. That's why I'm here. So anyways, not to drag this out too far, but honestly, in 2000, I went to work for a guy. And I'm going to point this out very specifically because he was in the news a couple of days ago. Went to work for a guy named Jay Chaudhry. Jay had built a couple of companies. He is a serial entrepreneur, grew up in India. Literally, he would tell me, we would sit down and he'd say he had a little mat on a dirt floor at school where he would learn, and then he ended up getting his bachelor's and master's in computer science. He came to the States speaking no English, very little English, and then he went to a university up in Ohio, I can't talk about. I went to Michigan. But anyways, he got a couple other master's degrees, and then he started a software company. It was actually a consulting company for software, ended up selling that to a company called Secure IT. Or he built Secure IT, sold it to VeriSign. The stock went up some 35 or 40 times. By the time he cashed out, it was over $3 billion. Me, I'm going home. I'm not working anymore. A couple of days ago, maybe 3 or 4 days ago, Jay was named as one of the wealthiest people in the world. He has a work ethic like no one I've ever seen. Just as a work. I wouldn't trade for that because I actually enjoy home, and wife and kids, and now I've got a second grandkid and do it here at the end of the month, so life is good from that perspective, but it's not fulfilling. Jay is fulfilled by work, and he does a great thing at it. That's what I want to go have, that nice fulfilling feeling. Many of the types of feelings many of you probably feel in the room today is that really putting your heart into something and living it out the best and most fully you possibly can. I interviewed with Jay. Jay would only interview on Sunday mornings before noon, because his view was, if you won't take part of your weekend, kind of I don't mean a sacred day from a religious standpoint, but if you're not willing to take time on a non-business day to go interview, then you're not serious about, really winning. Okay? So I interviewed at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning, got offered a position with him, and it was a startup. It was a startup. I was employee number 7, so we didn't even have a product for sale, and I was brought in to help figure out the whole sales and marketing side and how we were going to go develop this all out. Jay self-funded it because, of course, Jay had money. He self-funded. So I call it self-funded. Many people call it bootstrapping. When we get into this, I think you'll make the connections here. Jay self-funded it. Jay was paying all of our salaries, all of our expenses, everything out of his pocket. We were very, very, very careful with expenses. Lots of learning lessons for me. This is in 2000, by the way, so this is 19 years ago. 19 years ago, I was 35 years old. That was me 2 years ago, so I was thin there. This is what happens in retirement. This is why you have to go work. So somebody said to me the other day, they said, your cheeks are filling out. I'm like, oh, screw you. I don't like you anymore. So, no, it wasn't Michael. Yeah, look at his cheeks are filling out too. So I went to work for Cipher Trust, and I bounced around in different positions, but it was the first real core startup I've been in. I've been in the opposite. I had worked for Oracle for a number of years as well, so because I thought everybody ought to work for a big company. My father, former military, 22 years, said, got to work for a big company. He went from the military to a public utility, retired from both, and he said, and today I'm so glad I went and did what I did, because even the large companies today, their retirement plans are very different than what they used to be. So I don't know what safe is anymore, except watch out for yourself and your family and do what you do. If you've got that entrepreneurial spirit, by all means, go excitedly into the future. I worked for Cipher Trust for 6.5 years until we sold the company in 2006. As I go through these, I want to talk about now, kind of tie in kind of the different kinds of funding of what we did. Jay self-funded it, but at the end of the day, you get tired of funding things yourself, and very early on, I'm going to tell you within the first 90 days, Jay came to me as a sales guy. I'm one of two people, and he said, look, he says, if you really believe in the company, because I had already felt like it was mine. I mean, seriously, I felt that into it, because there's 7 of us, and you're trying to knock down the world. He said, I want you to invest some of your own money. And I went, oh, geez, think of me, this is the guy that's been dead a long time. I'm coming way out of this now, but holy cow, now it's one thing to say, I'm gonna work for someone, they pay me money. Another thing to say, I'm gonna invest my own. My wife and I went and sold our car, her car. We sold her car, took all the money out of our bank account, plus the $20,000 in commissions the company owed me, and we invested $100,000 in the Cipher Trust 90 days in. Scared the daylights out of me. But I'll tell you what, if you ever say, look at the money as if it's yours, when it is, you really think of it that way. And that got real serious real fast. And all of a sudden, my anxiousness about succeeding became much higher. And that was a very important lesson for me, is rather than be on a salary, make sure you're financially invested in whatever you do. And I'll touch on that later as if you ever decide to talk to any kind of professional investors. So I got very involved, and that turned out fairly well for us. We went 3.5, almost 4 years, and before the company went out and raised some venture capital. We raised $42 million from Battery Ventures and Greylock out of Silicon Valley. I remember I didn't run the process, but I was very much a part of the process, talking to the VCs. I was always, at that time, I was always the top sales guy, quarter after quarter, month after month, several years. I think I missed a couple. So they're very interested in talking to me about what works, what doesn't work in the company. So we got to get into some very interesting conversations, to the point where I actually moved my family out to California, and I actually lived from a work standpoint in one of the VC offices out there, where I got to interact with the VCs very, very strongly. So that was very interesting, looking at what they're looking at. And by the way, if you think they really want you personally, yeah, that doesn't work that way, until they figure out how they can make money. If they can make money from you and they like you, what a double bonus. But make no mistake, if you go in talking to a VC and it's not all about how easily, common sense language, how they're going to make money, it doesn't work that way. Okay, so anyways, we raised $42 million, and most of that was to go grow our sales and marketing and really spread out overseas. So we went into Asia, we went over into Europe really strongly and built out sales teams. Some worked, some didn't, but it was a way to expand, grow sales, and our sales were really booming. And keep in mind that this company was started right at the dot-com boom. So it was one with real growth. And so we sold the company in 2006. Less than a year later, they were acquired by McAfee. After we sold the company in 2006, I cashed out my very first $1 million check I'd ever gotten. That's a very special day, by the way. I mean, so it is earth-shattering to think that's I'm not going to tell you how much it was, but it was over $1 million. And so you get a check like that, and it's actually a direct deposit in your account. You go, wow, and then you realize I've got to pay taxes out of this, and then all of a sudden I got to pay off any other debts I have. You got to make sure you don't have a mortgage anymore, and all that stuff, and all of a sudden you're left with a small amount of money. If you think you're going to retire on $1 million, that's nutty. You got to think right now, people are living into their mid-80s, mid-90s, and how much money you have to have today to retire early, it's crazy. It's not, in my view. And I also want to make this comment to all of you as well, because I enjoy some of the finer things in life, but I'll tell you this. I know what I'm worth, and it's a decent amount of money, but then I'm looking at people like Jay who are worth, $10+ billion. There's no comparison. I don't work as hard as he does. I'm not as driven as much as he is. And part of all of this was the hand in the mirror, looking in the mirror. I, Michael Caldwell, am responsible for the consequences of my actions. I do the same thing today, because but that's getting to know you and what you're capable of and what you think your goals are, because not having a goal is a really difficult way to build a career. I still don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up. I'm having that exact same trouble. But I build my life in pieces. I live my life, quarters at a time. If that makes any sense, especially as background in sales. So, anyways, we sold that in 2007. Three of us that left Cipher Trust got together. We decided we were going to start our own company from scratch. Okay? This is a napkin kind of thing, sitting in a restaurant early in the morning. We took some of the money we had left over from that, and one of those was technical, one was sales, and I was the sales side, and we went and started a company called PureWire. We started that down. We got office space down in Buckhead. Crazy stuff where you go spend money because you think, you want to have the nice offices and all that. We were very careful to make sure we were fourth down in a sublease, so we got the nicest place we could get for the cheapest amount of money. But how we started that company, if you want to call it bootstrapping, we put $250,000 a piece into the company to get it started. We had an advisor on our board, somebody who had been involved in some executive management level at Cipher Trust, who put another $250,000 in. We had one of our employees, very senior guy, put in $150K. If you add all that up, it's $1.15 million. We went to Silicon Valley Bank down in Buckhead and opened up an account. Scary stuff. You're putting yourself in a line again, to the point at which you say, wow, if I lose all this, I'm back to the beginning again. Except now I'm learning so many lessons as we go through it. Long story short, that partnership, friends of mine, you learn a lot about people when you're in business with them. They learn a lot about me, I learn a lot about them. We decided that we weren't the closest of personalities after all these years of working together. So we split ways right after we sold the company 2 years and a day later to Barracuda Networks on the West Coast. And that was just north of $20 million, but keep in mind, as we went through this, I want to step you back. We put in $1.15 million, and the very first thing we did is we said, hey, if you believe in us, friends and family, and local investors who aren't acting as investors but really kind of a friends and family round, we'd like to get involved in our business. So I can tell you personally, if you haven't done so already and you're thinking about going to family for money, many times they'll give it to you, especially if they believe in you, especially if they believe you've got they're not investing in your idea so much, your friends and family, the literal sense of friends and family, they're investing in you, okay? And I'm telling you, this is where we get back to Joe's comment, and I'm laughing because I called Joe afterwards and asked if it was okay if I mentioned this, because when you say celebrate failure, let me say this. It's one thing if I put in $10,000 into a business and I lose it because of something I did. It's a whole other thing if I borrow $10 million in grandma from a retirement account that looks to that money and you lose that money. Very different thing. It's a whole other thing if a friend of yours says, listen, I believe in you, I'm going to invest $100,000 with you, and one of my friends did that too, put $100,000. I had 2 years of sleepless nights, literally, not all night, I slept at least half an hour. The worst 2 years of my life sleeping because we borrowed other people's money. These are the people I was deathly afraid of losing their money. It's one thing about professional investors like angels and VCs and that. We'll go into some of that if we ever have time and I let you ask questions. It's one thing to lose investors' money that are professional investors that understand risk. It's a whole other thing to invest friends and family money that maybe can't afford to lose that money. I to this day, and this is back from 2007 to 2009, I don't lend money to anyone, not a dollar. If I think that they need money, I give it to them. And my son and my family and friends and people I know in this room can say I'm a very giving person financially to people that need money. I never lend it. I never want that strength. I never want the conversation over Thanksgiving dinner to be different because I'm like, hey, well, why did you go on vacation? What made you do that? Why did you buy that new car? And you'll also notice as we go through this, I tend to think of everything in extremes. Mike will laugh when I say this because every meeting I've ever been in, and somebody makes a comment, I think in extremes. So to give an example, if I'm thinking I'd like to buy a new car, I literally think of the Prius. Maybe not a Bentley. I'm saying like there's a car yesterday announced that was the Bugatti. It's not the Bugatti Chiron. It was $12.5 million. For a car. So, and some of you might think, well, you say Prius is extreme. Yeah, that doesn't have a tailpipe. That's extreme to me. It's not a car. That's a yo-yo. It's really, that's good fuel economy. Anyway, so the point is that my comments, again, however you take them and ingest them, I'm trying to make some very basic comments, but to take the middle ground. That's typically where things are. When I hire a salesperson, I think, how do I motivate that salesperson? I can put them on 100% commissions, no salary, or I can pay them $250,000 salary, which is going to motivate them more. Me is somewhere in the middle. Give them some salary, some commission. You need to let them help them pay their bills, but get them hungry. I like salespeople in debt, because they get hungry. Love that. So anyway, so I've gone from, we borrowed some VC money at Cypher Trust to borrowing, literally friends and family, and bootstrapping and PureWire that turned out for us. But I'll tell you, we were acquired for as much as who we were at Cypher Trust. It was a competitor of ours at Cypher Trust that ended up acquiring PureWire because our team had proven itself. And you'll notice that's a theme as you start talking to investors. They're going to be very, very interested in the management team and very interested in your background. So and I can also tell you, as you get into professional investors, they're going to care very little about an idea as much as they will about track record. And I don't mean track record prior to what you're doing right now and if you have revenue. If you don't have revenue and you go to look to borrow money from a professional investor, typically they're not going to even return your call. I have no interest in talking to you because there's no proof, no even guess that they might actually get a return on their money. And what we should talk a little bit about that is what they expect to make on their money. And you're from Reinhardt, so thank you. I live in Waleska, so my part of the country. Took a long time to get down here this morning. So anyways, so PureWire ended. I made enough off of PureWire to, my wife and I moved up into the country, up into Waleska. We bought a house up there, bought some property, and I thought all was good. I decided to retire for a while, kind of like I'm doing now. It lasted 15 months until a buddy of mine who lived here in Woodstock, a long-time resident here, his name is Billy. Billy approached me and said, listen, I hear you've got some time in your hands. Billy and I weren't friends. We were very friendly. We knew each other from the chili cook-offs in the neighborhood. I used to live in Eagle Watch over here in Town Lake. And so he came and said, I hear you got some time. Love to bounce some ideas off of you, so we would go through those things in his business. Turns out I'm starting to travel all over the world with Billy as he's trying to build this little tiny company of 3 people. It's Billy, his niece, who does kind of the receptionist duties, sort of accounting duties, or is an outside accountant. And then when she got pregnant and went, he hired a person from Ronstadt, a temp, which he's such a big heart, didn't have the heart to let her go when his niece came back, and then there were 3. So I'm sitting with them going, wow, I mean, this is amazing. Billy's an amazing salesperson. He's not a business person. It's just not, and if you were sitting right here, I would not say it any differently. So I'm not picking on Billy because it was his heart and his ability as a late 40-something guy to say, I really don't know what I'm doing as it relates to business. I can sell, but I don't know. So he had built kind of a business to kind of pay all the bills and to get a boat, jet skis, and have fun, but deathly afraid that the next year was going to be the last year he'd be in business, right? So when I'm thinking China, I think Didi, right? You were over to China recently, so we're sitting over in a hotel in Shanghai. Our timetable's right upside down, so it's like 3 in the morning, and Billy says, hey Mark, I got a real serious question for you. I'm just traveling on my own dime. I'm just having fun now, something to do, honestly. It's just, I gotta get out of the house, right? So Billy says, would you have any interest in joining the company? I mean, this is a teeny tiny company. I said no for a couple reasons. One, I just left a company that we decided having business partners I don't know is for me. But number 2, I said I don't do well taking orders anymore. I like running things. I learned to trust my gut that I really can get things done if I put my heart to it. And he said, no, I want to talk about buying half the company. And I went, well, that's an interesting thing. So it's not like coming to work for him, but actually owning this thing with a business partner. It's another thing that's been important in my career is to realize that I know what I'm really good at. That's the looking in a mirror thing. And I know what other people around me are really good at, and I tend to do that as I surround myself with people that are really good at what they do and do really good things in the areas that I'm really bad at. Like, I'll tell you this, the difference between my son and I, one core difference, one, he's thin, I'm not. 2, his hair, I don't. The more important business aspect is he's very, very detail-oriented. I'm not. Big picture guy. I like the big story. Go build, the whole waves, and there are people that can fit those very specific niches that I need, I care about. To me, 1 + 1 = 3 when you surround yourself with the right people. So, having said that, Michael worked for us also at Python Safety, who was by far, and I don't say this because he's here, because I said this about somebody else in the room here a little earlier too. By far, he's the best natural salesperson I have ever met in my career. And if you could have a team of Michaels and April, who's in the room here, you can never lose. And that's what you find is you build those group of people around you, it almost can't fail. And by the way, the passion that comes in a group like this, when you go talk to professional investors, VCs, angels, they can't stay away. You look at small companies like, I don't know if you know the whole background behind Facebook, and I won't even talk about it. It's easy to find. There's movies about it. But if you look at the Facebook was so small, no revenue, but the passion behind it and the no track record, because Zuckerberg didn't have any track record of building companies prior to that, but you felt a drive going on. The VCs couldn't wait to be part of, begging to get their money in, as opposed to you go begging for their money. And I'm telling you, when you get a team that really works, that has just one major win, it's impossible not to get money from that standpoint. So little lesson there, but we'll get into that a little bit too. So we took this company called Power Block Industrial Supplies, PIS. It was a company that sold industrial supplies into the nuclear market, 6 customers, small amount of revenue. One of the things Billy had this idea about is he had a customer, McGuire Nuclear, that came to him and said, hey, our guys that are up at height, they have to wear harnesses and all that kind of stuff to keep themselves from falling. We're not having people fall anymore. You guys know what? I didn't know anything about that stuff. I knew nothing about industrial safety at all. So here I'm learning about something totally new. I was always in the software background. He said, this person, McGuire, said, our guys are dropping hammers and screwdrivers and all that kind of stuff. So we've learned as an industry how to keep people from falling, but what about the tools? And so Billy said, well, that's interesting. Well, you have that thing that it's connected to a harness called a lanyard or a tether to keep them from falling. Why don't we tie one of those to a tool? So when they use the tool and they drop it, it just drops the length of the lanyard, and that's it. And so we built some of those and a couple of pouches and a belt, to put these things on. And it had some success. He had $200K worth of revenue, $200,000. To me, that doesn't sound like a lot. I know in the beginning, getting $200,000 in revenue out of customers for the first time is very difficult. They have to really see value in you and the product that you're doing. So, and I kept looking at this, and he's saying, yeah, but 80% of our revenue is coming from flashlight, industrial supplies, adhesives, glues, flashlights, tape measures, stuff you go down literally to Harbor Freight, go to a nuclear power plant and sell for 3 times as much. That was the business. Except for this little piece over here, what she called his Python product. Python, like wrap around something and hold on like a snake. And I said, Billy, that's where the cool stuff is. And that's when we talked about, if I get involved, we need to get rid of all this other revenue. I know that sounds strange, but I've always said, focus is your friend. Focus is your friend, right? So what we did is we went directly into that, started focusing on that product line, built that up over the course of 3 years, $8.5 million. We sold that to a company that, while we were being acquired by 3M. So when I say we were acquired by 3M, there was intermediary, but they were being acquired as we were being acquired as part of that whole acquisition. So immediately we were now not 25 or 30 people, but now 92,000 people overnight. So so I've gone through the bootstrapping, part of the VC stuff, friends and family, to merger and acquisition, to a couple of acquisitions, and then we had to stay 2 years, and 2 years and a day later I left 3M, and that was back April 26th of 2017. So let's now get into kind of the more of the meat, I think. Are you guys okay so far? I haven't seen anybody sleeping totally yet, but a couple nods. But
I got a question.
Yeah.
Was R. Kelly an investor in this, or?
No, there were no investors in this. Well, wrong one. That's funny. Yesterday, I have a problem. I'm a hot tub right now. Yesterday, I called Sundance. I searched Sundance customer service on Google. I called Sundance. And I'm having strong words with the woman who won't seem to help me because I'm just looking for a wire that I cut in half because I was pissed off. So you're gonna piss, right? So I cut this wire. So it turns out I'm not talking to Sundance Spas. I'm talking to Sundance, the sun visors on the back of your house. She had no idea what I was talking about, and I was very annoyed by that. So anyways, so I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know who R. Kelly is. Never seen the news. So anyways, there are a number of ways that you can fund a small business. And if you haven't guessed so far, I'm the guy that leans as much as humanly possible to bootstrapping. Do what you need to do to raise the money yourself, borrow from yourself, sell stuff of your own. If you really want to do this and you have passion for it, you're willing to do just about anything from that standpoint. When you start borrowing other people's money, I don't care whether it's friends and family or professional money or bank money, it's a very different game. And you look at it differently. And that can be good and bad, okay? So I want to talk about angels for a minute, and then I want to talk about VCs, and I want to talk about bank loans, mentioned the SBA, and there's a whole host of other types of ways you can borrow money. And I'm not going to go through each one in any detail because you can find it all for yourself, but I wanted to go through my background to share what I've been a part of, what I've done, and what's worked for me. Okay, I am retired now, but again, if you guys have a great idea and I can get it for nothing, great, perfect, thanks. Angel investors, there's a term in the industry they call DDDI, right? Doctors and dentists with disposable income. What these are really is people who aren't really excited about what they're doing for a living, have extra money and want to make more money, and so they start investing. And it's not just doctors and dentists, but it's professionals. It's prior entrepreneurs that had a win. It'd be me if I wanted to go say, I want to put a fund together, my own fund to go invest in some entrepreneurial event I see fit, whether it's 10 grand, 50 grand, 500 grand. 500 grand is kind of the limit to the angels. And this is not, hard and concrete, but if you're looking for under 500K in your business, you typically want to go, bootstrap yourself, maybe some friends and family money. Angels are probably your way to go. A VC will not talk to you for under 500 grand. There's not enough money in it. What you'll find with angels is they tend to have a higher tolerance for risk, tend to have a longer time frame in order to gain their money back. So maybe a 10 or 12 or 15% a year, kind of growth on their money when they get paid back is what they're looking for. They like to be involved at some level, conversations, they like updates, and they want to track their money, make sure it's doing okay, make sure you're still on the right path. I think of people like on Shark Tank, by the way. Those guys to me are angels. They're guys that are taking their own money and they're investing in other people. I know one of the sharks. He used to be a partner of ours at Cypher Trust. But those are true angels to me. And there are a lot of angels here in town that are just, I say here in town, not necessarily in Cherokee County. There are some here, but not a lot. But in Atlanta, there's a couple of thousand angel investors that cover a broad range of industries, easy to find. And that'll be the first thing they'll be testing you is to see, do you have the gumption, the guts to go figure out how to find them? Do you have the intelligence to figure out how to find them? If you don't, they're really not seriously interested in lending their money to you. Okay? VCs are a different breed. There are thousands and thousands of VCs. I think I read yesterday that the total amount of VC money in the U.S. that's invested across all industries right now is just shy of $100 billion. It's like $95.5 billion. Okay, 70%, by the way, you've all heard those stats, 70 or 90% of businesses fail. But the stat that's really important is 70% of funded businesses fail. Okay, that's where the investors care because they're putting up real money, whether it's their own. VCs themselves tend to put up money and they build funds. These are funds that are directed towards certain types of investments. Like this might be invested into green energy. This fund might here be into cybersecurity and the software industry, and they have funds. So the first thing you want to know is who the VCs are. Easy to find out. Just Google, even your local area, or which VCs are, and if you've got a green idea, which VCs are participating in green projects right now, starting at about 500K and up, and it can be way up, to the tens and hundreds of millions of dollars, depending on the size of the business. VCs don't tend to get involved in small business ventures. They are very, very interested in things like the management team. By the way, it's easier to borrow money. This. I think much of what I say most of the time is very obvious. It's easy to borrow money when you don't need it. Easy to get VC money when you don't need any. Easy to get friends and family money when you don't need any. Shouldn't borrow it. I wouldn't go to the bank and get a loan if I didn't need a loan, right? But they're begging you to take their money. Very hard to get it when you need the money, which is why you start early. If you really think you want to go get investment money, you start early, a lot earlier than you think, because it's not 2 or 3 months to go through a process of getting VC money. It could be quarters or even typically sometimes more than a year. Sometimes due diligence will last 3 to 6 months, just of going through your books to make sure they completely understand the investment they're getting in. A VC typically won't touch you if they're not going to make 30% on their money annually. Okay? They want to know it's fast growing. They have no interest in the fact you have a great idea unless you can show revenue. They want to see revenue. The fact that you've actually proven out the concept. If you've got an idea that you go to a VC and say, I've got this great idea, I'm going to go build this. If you don't have a track record, maybe multiple times successfully exiting merger and acquisition or IPO, sometimes in management buyout that typically doesn't happen a lot these days. And by the way, this changes very, very frequently. So what I'm telling you is what I know to be true from my experience. But if you don't have a track record of successes, like I mentioned Zuck earlier, if he wanted to go borrow money, probably really easy, but he doesn't need it. But people know he's a walker, not a talker. He's not just good at a mouthpiece there. He actually does things, gets it done. If you're an entrepreneur, be a walker, not a talker. They'll help you a lot, and that it'll put you on second base already just to get just even towards getting the money. So most of the easiest money I've seen in the VC community is easier to get for growing your company than building it up. They want to grow. They want to see that you've proven out the concept, and how do we now scale it? And how do we scale it fast? If you ever make a comment like this to a VC, I just want to build this into a $15, $20 million a year company, and then I just want to ride this thing for the rest of my career. They go, I don't know who you are. What the hell are you talking about? They want to know that within 3 to 5 years, maybe 6 or 7 years max, that there's going to be a merger and acquisition, or there's going to be a buyout. They want to know that there's going to be some exit so they can get their money. A couple things about VCs, and the reason I bring VCs up and I'm talking about them so much at this particular point is because they made such a big deal about it last week in the presentation, is the VC money. Understand the dangers of VCs. One is there's obvious things they can do that can bring money. And if they think you're going to spend the money right, then they may be able to help you. They will also, without your input, they will provide suggestions on how you spend their money. Very directly. Not only things like, well, obviously we're going to have a seat or seats on your board. And oh, by the way, if you don't have a board, a VC will make you put one together. You'll have to have a board, and they'll have to have a seat or two on that board so they can help make those decisions with you. And by the way, understand, as the CEO of your own company, the board can fire you. It happens often. Sometimes that suggestion that they make in going into investing their money into a small company is, you can't be CEO anymore. We want to bring somebody we trust in to build out your business. And you have to be like Billy and go, wow, can I really take a step back and let somebody take my place and do this? And at the end of the day, they give you go through all the process from an executive summary that they call, it's almost the grandmother test. If you have an executive summary no more than 2 pages and it gets into gobbledygook and deep technical jargon, you've already lost them. It's the grandmother test. If I gave this to my grandmother, she read it, she understand what her business is. Okay, it's got to be that simple. Very straightforward language. Here's my idea. This is what we're trying to do. This is the goals. This is what we've done. Very simple. And then a full business plan. Lots of different kinds of business plans. But a well thought out business plan that says, if you are nice enough to give us your money, or if you're in a position of power where you say, if I let you give me your money, then this is how we're going to spend it. Well, then it's a much better chance, again, just these little things to make sure you put your best foot forward. But the VCs at the end of the day, if you get so far through the process where they go through due diligence, they go through your books, they go through your management team, they understand who on that team they like, they don't like, some they want gone, some they say we want some other people to augment your management team. You get a term sheet that says, okay, this is what we think the valuation of your business is. This is how much we're willing to invest at this interest rate, and this is when we expect to be paid. And if you don't, here are the penalties involved. They'll give you about that much time. 2-3 weeks would be a long time to consider that term sheet, because the last thing they want you to do is take that term sheet. 55 minutes, did you say, or 5 minutes? So the last thing they're going to do is to say, is to let you go and shop that out. So, by the way, did I lose anybody there? Because I know I'm throwing a lot. This is my brain is like spinning like a. Anyways, okay. So yeah. Do I have 5 minutes or 5 minutes of talk or questions and everything? Because I'm willing to open it up.
If you could kind of wrap things up within 5 minutes, this way.
Then we can have some questions.
10 minutes to ask.
Okay, good. I can absolutely do that. I think I didn't have to look at my notes. I've gone through virtually everything now. There are other areas that I know of to go borrow money, and I'm just going to mention them now. So I told you the ones I've been involved with, the ones I understand much more deeply. I've never tried to borrow money from the SBA, the Small Business Administration. I know no one in my career that has ever gone and done that. Maybe some of you have. I understand it's a fairly difficult process. You have to have a lot of assets for them to lend you money. By the way, they'll lend you money through commercial banks. So the SBA doesn't actually lend you money. They work with a lender, like BB&T or Wachovia, to lend you money, and it gives you favorable rates. But if you don't have kind of a rock solid financial background with assets that they can go and take, that doesn't come through, very few times you get grants. Very difficult to do that. So I never went down that path. There is a program in the government right now. What most people don't understand is you can actually, I forget what it's called, a ROBL, ROBL, I think it is, and you can actually borrow money from your 401k or retirement plan to fund a business. Scary stuff. Some people do it. I've never met anybody that ever did in my circles. When I talk about conventional banks, one thing we did at Python Safety, I never said that, is we took PIS, and we rebranded it as Python Safety because of Python. We got rid of all the other revenue. We grew Python Safety up to the point where we sold it back 3.5 years later. Python, we actually opened up a line of credit against our accounts receivables with BB&T just so we had money to borrow, which we did. So if we wanted, so I could stop funding it because I worked for the first 9 months for free. I didn't pay myself, which is part of my, it's part of my just being involved. So we got a $500,000 bank loan that we could borrow from against accounts receivables, and that worked out for us a couple times when we were doing manufacturing, where we needed $300,000 or $400,000 at a time, not taking the money out of my own pocket when I didn't have to, but it also helps build that creditworthiness so that if you were looked at from another investor, they're going to look at that and say, just like when I was a college student, I borrowed $1,200 to buy my first computer, I paid it off over time, that's my almost beginning of my credit history. Same exact idea, right? So I think I've touched on just about all the kinds of funding. I'm sorry that 45 minutes doesn't allow us to get into the depths of depths. I would love to walk you through some stuff. One thing I will tell you this is VCs don't like losing their money, nor do angels, nor do friends and family. Friends and family almost the worst. VCs almost expect it 70% of the time. So they want to win, which is why they need to have some assurances they're going to make 30+% of the money because of all the losses that they have. I do know a couple of people who borrowed $60 million from VCs after they bootstrapped the business with a couple of $1 million between the two of them, and within 2 years lost all of that. And that happened here in Atlanta in the last couple of years. So you can lose the money. That's from Amazon Ventures and Google Ventures. There are companies like Amazon and Google that have billion-dollar funds that they use to make venture capital investments in small companies. So you have some great idea, they are an avenue. But it's hard to get money from them again once you do that. Be very, 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 I guess my bottom line lesson would be this. Be very wary, very careful about the money you borrow. There is money out there if you have the right story, the right personality, with the right product, right idea, and certainly if you have the right revenue. But boy, believe you me, when you take money, that's like getting married, maybe even worse. You're married to that money, and they have a lot of say on how you run your business. Okay, so I think I'm going to let it there, and we'll just answer questions.
That's great. Thank you. So for our next format, we'll take about 7 or 8 minutes. And ask questions, make comments. I've got a mic, and Ellie has a mic. Let's see her over. Oh, there she is in the back. And if you would just raise your hand, we want to make sure that we can capture your question, your comment on the live feed, and also make sure everybody can hear it. So if you have a comment or a question, if you would raise your hand.
I normally walk around. I've been sitting here because I'm so cold. I wonder if that global warming is.
Mark, really appreciate your comments. As a commercial banker, I'm certainly a little biased towards the debt side of the equation. But maybe go through the process of how you kind of value your company and what that looks like when you're going to the market. Because debt can be expensive, but equity can be far more expensive. And for some of the reasons you mentioned, not just from a financial standpoint, but from a control standpoint. And
sure.
Maybe walk through that process a little bit.
Yeah, again, everything is from my perspective. Part of my brain says, give a standard stock answer. Part of it's from my process, right? And if you didn't hear, I think all you heard the questions from a debt versus an equity standpoint. Angel investors and there's different ways to structure borrowing money even from professional investors too, even from angels. So instead of giving them equity, you can say, in a certain period of time, you'll either own this % of the company or I'll pay you X% interest on your money that you invested. And that's actually what we did at Python, is we ended up paying out 8% on the money as a convertible debt. So that's the way we did that. How I typically approach it is I'm looking at my team and I'm thinking, what do we need? Do we just need money or do we want some expertise? Okay, so if I just need money, I just needed money from BB&T, right? We got a $500,000 line of credit because I just needed money to fund some more manufacturing. I didn't need somebody to come and tell me how to run my business. We were already, running very strong, profitable, cash flow positive every quarter for over 2 years at that point, which made it easy to get the money, but they weren't offering anything other than that. I'm pausing in my own brain. I have a ... because it says also from the VCs. If you think the VCs are getting involved and they're going to bring a whole wealth of expertise to the table to share with you, they're not going to tell you how they think you ought to do it. They're going to force your hand in how they think you ought to do it if you're not doing it their way, because it's not their money, right? So you also have to be very careful in the beginning. I love the question from this standpoint. Here's an example of a friend of mine. I have a friend out in Seattle. I'm not going to name him. He's a great guy, by the way. He's built up a company in the safety space, and he went through the same process. He borrowed some money from the banks early on. He ended up paying that back out of his own personal money because he decided not to bootstrap it up front. He was going to borrow money, and it's his first venture. He just raised another $2.5 million from another VC group here, literally in the last week. I asked this gentleman after he's raised all this money. I said, "So I'm going to name his name. So Fred, my name's not Fred. That's just an inside joke, right? So Fred, I said, so how much of your company do you still own? Because I'm really curious. You keep raising money." He says 6%. I said, 6%, and that's part of the question: is how much equity are you really willing to give up? Because I said 6%. I said you can't make any money. You can't make any money. And but then you get step back and you think in terms of extremes. If it's worth $100 billion and he someday and he's got 6%, that's a lot of money. If it's worth $1 million, it's worth $60K. So part of that is how much equity you're willing to give up. And to me, equity, as a small company, equity was always something you keep nice, close to the heart, really, really tight. When we sold Python, we made almost a little over, just under $40 million to that. We owned all the equity, 100% of it. So part of, I'm not answering your question directly how I approach it, because it's not scientific. It's where I am in that process to say, am I willing to give up some equity? Me, I would rather give up some equity to a key management employee that has this expertise. I'd rather give that person 2 or 3% of the company than I would to give the VC that. Now, there are companies, if I wanted to go create a company that will compete with Tesla, I can't bootstrap that, right? I'm gonna have to go out and get outside professional money, and I'm gonna give up part of my company for that, and that's up to you to decide too, is how much of your company do you decide to give up? Because it never goes as well as you think it will in the first year or 2 years, so now you're borrowing more money, giving up more equity, so it's kind of my pseudo answer.
Good, thank you. So kind of what I'm hearing you say is...
I was blunt, I said what I wanted to say.
Okay.
I'm kidding. I'm so kidding.
Then we're done?
I'm totally kidding.
What I'm hearing you say is that really you have to be strategic about your debt. If you're going to go into debt, whether it be through a VC, your friends and family, or through a bank. And it's not just what you're going to do with the money, it's how you're going to pay that money back.
Oh yeah.
Specifically, and can you pay the money back?
If you get a sense for me when you get to know me, I do not celebrate failure. I am deathly afraid of it. I'm deathly afraid of failure, and it's a motivator. I'm not afraid to get in it. I'm not afraid to lose money. I learned there's another way. I've learned not to do something instead of using the word failure. You know, when it's other people's money or I borrow money, then I'm very, very cautious about what I do, and I don't want to overthink things. I trust my gut, which is why I like we kind of funded the lesson ourselves. But yes, you need to be very careful about taking $10,000 from grandma or a friend or anybody else, or $100,000 or $3.3 million. It's scary stuff.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
I don't know. I always have something to say.
That's why
No, so having been a part of this group and sitting in here before and thinking about what the last presentation was, this is a local chapter. What are you seeing here from the business community, or the what we say a budding business community is our biggest black hole right now in our expectations of what it means to actually grow a business? Or is that enough of a question for you?
No, it's a deep question. I want to say it depends, but it really doesn't.
Is that over beers?
No, it's something you and I have talked about over certain times, and you know, I made a comment really early on, right at the beginning, when I said sometimes I wish we could be more brutal, and you could say to somebody, "You shouldn't be an entrepreneur." You know, I just don't think. I think honestly, this takes guts. I mean, I'm serious, deep, gut-wrenching drive to make things work, because what we're talking about here, entrepreneurship, is really hard. It can be extremely fulfilling. It's kind of like, in a way, it can be a marriage that, you know, my wife was a complete opposite of the political spectrum when we got married, and that caused lots of strife just in how we raised our kids and everything else, and you fight through that because it was so fulfilling. I was so challenged by that. Turns out she was too, which is good. You know, she said, "I never want to marry a guy that doesn't have hair," and I'm going to tell her all kinds of ways. But the point being is that I think that you need to think long and hard. Ask the hard questions, and also I would say to yourself, if you really are an entrepreneur, not with something that's making money now, but you've just got an idea, make sure you look in the mirror and raise your hand and go through that thing again. I'm responsible for the consequences of my actions, because especially as it comes to funding that and building it, if you lose, just forget about other people's money. If you just lose all your own money and you've got a significant other, that's a challenge in and of itself. But make sure you're ready for ugly, because it can get ugly, but it can also be the most fulfilling thing you've ever done in your life. I don't know if I answered your question. That's what it strikes me hard.
Well,
not all people are entrepreneurs.
So what I'm trying to figure out is, as we look at our community, I actually think that's really good that we need to hear that. We need that kind of forward, direct response. But we also then need to decide, what we talked about last time was, if 0.03% or whatever it was are the entrepreneurs and the rest of the supporters, are we a supportive community that, and if so, how do we position ourselves so we can be more honest and say, hey, maybe I'm not the entrepreneur, but I will support you.
I tend to be blunt, so here's one thing I would say. I think it would be an interesting challenge. I do not suggest we do it because we won't have a lot of people come anymore, but I'll tell you, but this is just Mark being blunt, right? If we had a presentation like me, I come up here and I stand and I give you an idea and I say this is what I'm doing, and at the end of the presentation, everyone had to come here, by the way, with $100 in their pocket. At the end of the conversation, then Dennis would walk around and say, okay, has this person convinced you that based on the limited information you have, based on their idea, you'd be willing to part with that $100 to invest in your business? It'd be a very interesting exercise. I mean, because if you can't convince this group that your idea is good enough to invest $100, how the hell are you going to go to a bank or to a VC or to an angel investor and get hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars?
Yeah, that's great. I love that idea.
It's actually too
We have to
brutal.
talk to John about that.
I never said it. Shut up the tape.
Good. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you guys. I
Round of applause
really do.
for Mark, please.
Thank you very much.